What if I told you that overnight, President Trump just stopped another war, crushed the fear of $200 oil, and in the same breath, he ripped the mask right off the Federal Reserve's biggest lie? Because this is exactly what just happened, and nobody in the corrupt mainstream media wants you to understand why. Well, today, we are going to break it all down, how Operation Midnight Hammer forced Iran to the table, how the Democratic Republic of Congo is now chanting Trump's name in the streets, and how America's gas prices could drop just as the globalists in Washington lose their complete grip on your wallet for good. So this could be really good news, guys. But here's a twist that nobody wants to even tell you. While President Trump's precision strikes and deal making are sending markets soaring, the Fed's own insiders are leaking bombshell proof that Jay Powell's so-called independence was nothing but politics in disguise. The truth? His excuses for keeping your borrowing costs high just collapsed. I'll just go ahead and tell you right now. All of Jay Powell's excuses for keeping interest rates high have just collapsed, and the White House absolutely knows it, guys. Millions of Americans are waking up to cheap gas, a booming stock market, and of course, an economy finally running on America First fuel, not the Fed's old smoke and mirrors. So why is Powell in real trouble now? And what's next when this peace deal puts trillions of dollars back in your pockets and exposes who's really blocking your prosperity? Well, guys, stay right there, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how President Trump's ceasefire crushed the Middle East crisis, while the Nobel Peace Prize talk is dead serious this time, and how Jerome Powell's indefensible lies just blew up in his face and in front of the entire world. So all of this is coming up next, guys. I just cannot wait to share this with you. If you appreciate the daily news updates, take a second, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel. All right, so let's lay it out all crystal clear, okay? Because nobody in mainstream media is giving you the full picture. And I think that's intentional. Do y'all think that's intentional? You let me know. So last night, President Donald J. Trump, your president, stopped a war that every expert told you was guaranteed to blow wide open. I'm talking about the so-called unstoppable clash between Israel and Iran. You guys might remember all of these different headlines for years. Trump's gonna start World War III. He's too dangerous. He's a threat to democracy. He'll light up the Middle East like never before. Y'all heard that, right? Well, guess what? They were dead wrong again. So here's what actually happened. Instead of endless negotiations where Iran strings the West along for another decade while they hide uranium in mountain bunkers, President Trump's team launched Operation Midnight Hammer. One clean, precision strike, 3 hardened nuclear sites neutralized. No drawn out quagmire, no full scale invasion, guys, it was literally just smart force, perfectly timed leverage, and a phone that rings in Tehran with one simple message: stand down or we'll finish this tomorrow. And it worked. Iran's supreme leader resurfaced from his hidden bunker, humiliated on the world stage, forced to claim a fake victory just to try to save face while everybody else knows his bluff got called. But here's a twist. While the Ayatollah is licking his wounds, Trump's not done. Because behind the scenes, away from the CNN cameras, he also pulled off what 6 U.S. presidents either ignored or just failed to solve: a real final peace deal between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. So you want to talk about human cost? Over 6 million dead since the 1990s. Families torn apart by brutal militias, children displaced, waves of refugees flooding other nations, just trying to survive. And for decades, right? For decades, crickets, basically, from the so-called leaders of the free world, they kind of like almost forgot about Africa or whatever. I can't even get into why they just ignored them. They sent half-hearted envoys, photo ops. You'd see some pictures in Time magazine, but no real solutions. And then all of a sudden, President Trump steps in. He sat the foreign ministers down. He called in the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, his trusted circle, and said, enough. There's a deal to be made, or there's no trade with us. Pick one. That's leverage. That's real world pressure. And now Eastern Congo, for the first time in 3 decades, has a shot at peace. So the next time some late night pundit calls Trump reckless, remind them he ended the India-Pakistan standoff before it exploded. He diffused Serbia, Kosovo? I have a hard time saying that place. He ended that tension with a single phone call and trade threats. He boxed Iran into a corner, and he forced a ceasefire with Israel that has ultimately held so far. And so now he's brought hope to millions of Americans whose only hope used to be survival. So he's not reckless. He's relentless for peace, but not the fake peace of empty UN speeches, the kind that actually costs nothing to the political class, but everything to the people who are stuck under the bombs. Trump's version is real, strategic, it's tough, and focused on everyday people who are, paying the highest price when their weak leaders fail. But when budgets are tight, the last thing you want is money wasted on some overpriced insurance, right? Well, 123 Forever Blessed One said, Chapter just saved me thousands and got me free premium Instacart for groceries. It was so easy. I'm telling everybody. Wow, I really appreciate you sharing your experience with Chapter with me. But Frances Lutero also shared her experience with Chapter, says, we save $65 every month. That's food on the table for us. Chapter really helped. Wow. Give our friends at Chapter a call and see how much money you can save. Their number is 909-563-8279, or you can hit them up on the web, even better, at askchapter.org/Ron. Link in the pinned comment down below. Get the real help you deserve. Oh, and they're totally free. All right, guys. So if you think that these historic peace deals that I just shared with you guys are just some, foreign headline, think again, okay? Because while the bombs stopped falling, your wallet just got a little heavier. Anybody okay with that? Their wallet getting a little heavier, a little bit more green in there. So when Iran threatened the Strait of Hormuz, the single biggest choke point for global oil shipping, the entire world braced for $200 oil. Now that means not just gas prices spiking, but your groceries spiking, your flights, your heating bills, everything is tied to the price per barrel. We all know this, right? Well, one shut strait could literally have driven the fear index through the roof. And let's not even pretend about the previous presidents who, didn't let that fear linger for decades, right? Cutting side deals, ignoring smuggling networks, hoping a vague diplomacy speech would just kind of like work while Iran played cat and mouse underground, basically playing grab ass. But this time, no. Trump said no. One strike, Operation Midnight Hammer, and Iran didn't even have time to shout, really. I mean, their bluff was called immediately. The threat ended before the markets even woke up. And the result? Oil prices dropped instead of spiking. Traders dumped their fear positions overnight. Energy giants adjusting. Yes, but the real markets, the S&P, the Dow, rallying on lower risk, higher confidence, cheaper fuel. Guys, and here's what this means for you and for your family. More money left in your pockets when you fill up. More savings for small businesses moving freight. More cash that stays in America's Main Street economy instead of bleeding out through energy blackmail, which is really what it is. And so let's be clear about or more importantly, how this happened. Or even more important than how, screw the how. Let's be clear about why this happened. President Trump's energy plan is rather simple. We don't bow to foreign oil despositos. We unleash our own. And if you threaten the flow, we don't lecture you. We bury your leverage and we dare you to test us again. 6 presidents before him ignored these hotspots. Trump resolved them in a matter of months. And this is why the markets erupted the moment the peace deal was real. Not fake, not fragile, but real. And the best part, this is only the opening act, because what happens when the people of the Congo start chanting Trump's name and building statues in the streets? What happens when a Nobel Peace Prize nomination actually lands on the desk? Not for talking about peace, but for actually stopping the dying for real. So let's keep pulling this thing back, right? Because the next piece we need to talk about should be front page news everywhere. But you and I know exactly why it's not being put on the front page. When President Donald Trump sat those leaders from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda down in the Oval Office, I want you to just think about that image for a second. Decades of bloodshed, warlords, child soldiers, minerals fueling black markets and global corruption, all traced back to this conflict that nobody wanted to solve. But one man said enough. And it wasn't a UN convoy. It wasn't a European summit. It was an American president with actual leverage and the guts to use it. Because here's what really sealed the deal. Trump didn't just offer handshakes and stage photos. He backed it with real leverage. Rwanda and the DRC, they need the American markets. They want deals. They want infrastructure. They want US dollars flowing legally. And Trump made them choose. Keep killing each other or open your borders to prosperity with us. You can't have both though. And so now the people of the Congo are literally building statues to Trump. Statues. Now you're not going to see that on MSNBC, but locals are out there pouring cement, hoisting posting metal plates, carving his name in banners. They know who made this happen, not the talking heads in Brussels or Geneva, but the one man in Washington, D.C. who didn't treat them like another photo op. President Felix Tshisekedi, the DRC's leader, has already hinted publicly that when the time is right, he wants President Trump's name formally submitted for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I want you to think about this for a second. Barack Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize back in 2009. Why? For talking about hope, for promoting dialogue, for symbolic diplomacy. He got a medal and $1.4 million in prize money before he even had a single foreign policy win on the board. He was just talking about it. Now, if we fast forward to today, you got Trump ending an Africa conflict that cost millions of lives, ending an Iran-Israel standoff that risked dragging the entire world into a regional meltdown, and ending an India-Pakistan powder keg, cooling off Serbia and bringing the world's biggest oil choke point under America and American control without even firing a single extended war. Guys, if that's not Nobel Peace Prize material, then I want you to tell me what else. Like, what would be if that's not, right? If this isn't Nobel Peace Prize material, then to me, I feel like that prize means nothing. And the people in the streets of Kinshasa, they know who their real peacemaker is. They chant his name while our own corporate press pretends it didn't even happen. And you know what, guys? That disconnect is exactly what makes this next twist so satisfying, because as President Trump's racking up these historic wins, somebody else's credibility is collapsing in real time. So I want to get into it. And this is really where the story gets hot. So while President Trump's ceasefires are calming markets and putting real money back in your pocket, the so-called guardians of the economy, not to be confused with the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Federal Reserve, are being exposed for what they really are: a cozy club that spent years working against prosperity to protect their own swamp influence. So let's talk about Jay Powell, shall we? The man corporate media always calls independent, neutral, above politics. Well, not anymore. Here's the reality. Jay Powell jacked up interest rates during Trump's first term, ignoring low inflation and strangling growth when it matters most, all while the mainstream media nodded along. Then, when Biden needed a boost in 2020, Powell suddenly turned dovish, opening the floodgates and letting easy money flow like a bribe wrapped in monetary policy. So now, fast forward, even with inflation dropping, with tariffs bringing in billions in new revenue, with families suffocating under old debt, Powell still refused to cut. He told the cameras he's in no rush. He blamed Trump's tariffs, but the data proves the opposite. Inflation cooled because Trump forced fair trade deals and cheaper energy, not because the Fed did its job. And so now the insiders are leaking the receipts. Senior White House economic votes have come out swinging and essentially calling Jerome Powell's excuses indefensible. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called him out for dragging his feet while the rest of President Trump's team was making peace, cutting taxes, and essentially bringing trillions back on shore. The cold truth, the only reason our markets didn't pop sooner is because Jay Powell and his circle were dragging the brakes, hoping to limit Trump's momentum, but they failed. And so now the White House knows it. Capitol Hill knows it too. So you're going to hear this more and more. Some Republicans and even some, even a few embarrassed Democrats are floating whether Jerome Powell should even finish his term because the trust is gone. The fake neutrality is dead. The data killed the spin. So while the media screams about Trump's risk, the markets themselves are telling you the real story. The biggest risk was never the tariffs. It was the Fed's stale chokehold on growth. Think about that. While Trump was striking peace, forging trade leverage, and tearing up old surrender deals, Powell's clique was basically pretending that they knew best. But the numbers don't lie. Your pocket doesn't lie. The gas tank for damn sure doesn't lie, right? So now let's go ahead and connect the dots, because here's the part that the old guard hates more than anything else. When peace breaks out, fear breaks down. And when fear breaks down, prosperity wakes up. Trump's own ceasefires didn't just cool the Middle East and Africa. They unlocked momentum right here at home. The final nail in the swamp's narrative coffin is what President Trump calls the big, beautiful bill. This is a direct extension of what peace dividends should look like when real patriots hold the pen. So what's in this bill? Well, here's a snapshot, because every line is designed to put America first and shut down the lie that we can't afford to take care of our own. So the first line item is no tax on tips. Think about that. Every restaurant worker, barista, bartender, server, every single dollar you bust your back for in tips is tax-free. The next line item is no tax on overtime. So if you're grinding 50, 60, 70 hours a week to get ahead, the government shouldn't steal that extra overtime. Trump's bill locks that up. Keep your overtime tax-free. The other line item, I should say another line item, is no tax on Social Security. The money you paid in your whole working life, you should keep it when you retire. No more backdoor skimming from Washington bureaucrats. Oh, and here's the genius kicker. Trump accounts. Every newborn in America gets $1,000 seeded to buy real equities, to learn real financial literacy. So no future socialist or swamp bureaucrat can strangle the next generation's dream without a fight. So how does it get paid for? It's simple. The same tariffs that the so-called experts said would tank the economy. And so instead, they're funding the biggest deficit reduction since Reagan, and maybe even bigger. Billions clawed back through spending rescissions, billions more coming in by cutting the goofy swamp pet projects that should never have been funded in the first place. And who confirmed it? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. This is Trump's guy. He laid it out. He said this peace wave means cheaper energy, higher market confidence, and new trade leverage. And that means more revenue without more taxes. That is the real Trump doctrine. Peace abroad, prosperity at home. And every time Jerome Powell or the DC head, talking heads, claim that, oh, we can't afford it, the data proves that they're wrong. No more excuses, only results. But wait until you hear how the cracks in Jerome Powell's fortress are now turning into outright revolts inside the halls of power right now. So let's not even sugarcoat it. While President Trump's economic engine is revving, the Fed's credibility is burning. Powell and his cozy little crew at the Fed, they were playing gatekeeper for decades, acting like, only they could be trusted with the right interest rates, the right borrowing costs, the right money flow. They told you inflation was unstoppable. They said tariffs would torch the economy. They said that President Trump's trade stance, it was going to crash the market. Every piece of it, flat out wrong. So here's what we now know. And insiders leaking it, they're just leaking this data by the day. So Jay Powell deliberately sat on interest rates. Matter of fact, this guy, he sat on rate cuts while inflation fell, blaming tariffs for phantom spikes that never materialized. Meanwhile, American families shouldered record credit costs, businesses paid more for capital, homeowners got squeezed, all while Trump's new deals, new peace moves, and all the new energy policies were quietly fixing the very risk that Powell claimed he was fighting. This is why the White House's own economic team, folks like National Economic Director Kevin Hassett, they're going on record calling Powell's excuses indefensible. Not just a bad call, he said that they're indefensible. Even some moderate Democrats now admit that the Fed's neutrality is shot. Word in the halls of Congress is that there's talk about tightening the leash, maybe even pushing Powell out altogether if he continues dragging his feet while Trump's plan is delivering results faster than the Fed's stale playbook ever could. It's not just some fringe rumor either. Listen carefully, folks. The same Jerome Powell who claims to be in no rush to cut interest rates just gave his quiet testimony this week, basically begging for time because he knows his bluff is blown. He sees the markets rallying despite him, not because of him. He sees the bond yields are adjusting, oil prices are dropping, consumers are spending, and none of it is thanks to the Fed's tight fists. And so if you need more proof, watch the stock indexes next week. Watch how they just keep moving when Jerome Powell stays on the sidelines. The money men know. The peace deals, the big beautiful bill, the no tax on overtime, the Trump accounts, that's what's stabilizing America's future. Not some stale suits in the marble tower pretending that they're above politics while they pull political strings behind the scenes. The question now is rather simple. Does the Fed keep playing kingmaker, or does the American voter finally realize who's really driving prosperity here? So here we are. The truth is on the table. The spin stripped away. Let's just call it exactly what it is. The so-called guardians of the old system, they want you to think that, that the grown-ups in the room, they're the only ones that can steer your future. They cling to the illusion that with headlines, with fancy jargon, that, with think tank sound bites about global stability. Meanwhile, they're getting rich selling fear to the same families that they're draining at the pump and at the bank. But look at what just happened and ask yourself, who's actually running the show right now? When President Trump stepped onto the NATO stage this week, he didn't just show up with a handout or an apology. He showed up with leverage. He showed up with the results the American people were promised back in 2016, demanded in 2020, and confirmed again in 2024 when they said, we want a deal maker. not a do nothing. He didn't lecture Israel and Iran. He ended their standoff. He didn't fly pallets of cash to Tehran in the dead of night. He sent bunker busters to their hidden nuclear sites. Then he picked up the phone when they begged for a ceasefire. Well, he actually didn't ignore Africa. Look at that, right? He didn't ignore Africa's heartbreak, much like what, 6 previous presidents. They ignored Africa, right? He put real economic muscle behind real demands for peace. And the people who matter, the mothers, the fathers, the kids in the Congo streets who finally see hope, they know his name because their hope has a face. So now flip that coin. What did Jerome Powell, what did Powell's Fed do in the same week? Oh, they dragged their feet, blamed tariffs that never drove up your bills, refused to cut rates while your mortgage stayed sky high and your credit cards squeezed tighter. The same club that tried to sabotage growth before the election now caught flat-footed when the receipts leak and the markets roar despite them. So here's the uncomfortable reality that the swamp wants you to forget. If these so-called adults in the room were so smart, so wise, so essential, then why did the numbers look so much better when they get sidelined? It's not the Fed that gave you peace with Iran. It's not the Fed that made oil drop. It's not the Fed that brought African leaders to the table and told them you get trade if you get peace, period. It's not the Fed that said tips should be yours, overtime should be yours, Social Security should be yours, tax-free because you earned it, not them. This is President Trump's doctrine in plain English. Stop apologizing for putting Americans first. Negotiate like your kids' futures depends on it, because it does. Tell our so-called enemies you want deals. Earn it. Or stay out in the cold. Then go ahead and back that sucker up with some muscle. Back it up with some leverage. Back it up with facts on the ground. And guess what? They fold. So here's the final twist that really makes this so satisfying, guys. It's the same legacy press that spent 8 years telling you Trump would start World War III. They have nothing to say now when he ends 3 wars in the span of months. They said that he would tank the economy with tariffs, yet the same tariffs are paying for your tax relief and wiping out parts of a runaway deficit. They said that the man was reckless, yet the only leader with the spine to say no more endless conflict or no more endless access to the American market. So you know what that is? That's smart. That's strategic. That's compassionate. Not the fake compassion that hands out foreign aid while ignoring your paycheck, but real compassion that says, hey, America's strength keeps the world honest, and your prosperity starts with our people first. So let me leave you with this question today. Who really runs the show? The unelected suits in the Marble Tower, or the millions who still believe America should stand strong, stand fair, and stand ready to negotiate peace from power? You decide. You always did. So if you believe that this truth needs to reach more Americans, hit the like button right now. Share this video with someone who still thinks that peace is a fairy tale. Drop a comment down below. Tell me, do you trust President Trump's bold record or the Fed's excuses? I'm gonna read every single one. And if you want more real talk, more receipts, more facts that the legacy outlets will not touch, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell right now. Also, do not miss another critical update. Click the breaking news link down below in the pinned comment and join our community newsletter right now. We got more to cover, guys, and trust me, this story is just getting started.